I trusted her and she destroyed my life. My own son, friends, and family turned against me overnight. Every lie she told felt like a knife in my back. I couldn't sleep, eat, or think straight. Panic attacks and fear consumed me. She planned it all and I had no idea. This is the story of the most devastating betrayal I've ever faced. I still remember the sound of my own name being spat out like poison in that crowded room. How could you? My sister hissed, her face twisted in disgust. After everything, you're sick. Every set of eyes turned on me, the people I had loved and trusted most in this world. My brother, my oldest friends, even my wife. Their faces were masks of shock, anger, disappointment. Nobody asked me to explain. Nobody gave me a chance to speak. And at the centre of it all stood Katherine, my daughter-in-law, arms crossed, crocodile tears clinging to her lashes. She looked like a victim, trembling, her voice breaking as she said, I didn't want to tell anyone, but I couldn't keep the secret anymore. I couldn't let him keep doing it. The room erupted in murmurs. Asks. A friend I'd known for 30 years muttered, Jesus Christ, and looked away. My chest tightened. My knees buckled under me. What the hell are you talking about, Katherine? My voice cracked raw with disbelief. Doing what? What are you saying? She didn't look at me. She buried her face against my son's shoulder. My own son. He wrapped his arms around her protectively, glaring at me with a hatred I had never seen in his eyes before. You disgust me, he said. His voice was low, shaking, but full of venom. I should have seen it sooner. It was like being punched in the stomach. The air left my lungs in a rush, and I staggered, hands reaching out for something solid. My wife recoiled as I brushed her arm. She stepped back as though my touch would burn her. Katherine, I begged, whatever this is, whatever lie you're spinning, stop it. Please don't do this to me, to us. Her voice, fragile and broken, floated above the crowd. You're a predator. You made me feel unsafe in my own home. I stayed silent out of fear, but I won't anymore. The word predator cracked through the air like thunder. Every bone in my body went cold. My skin prickled with fire. I felt the walls closing in, the judgment and I sealing me into a coffin of shame I didn't deserve. That's not true. I roared, finally finding strength in my throat. I've never, how dare you say something like that about me? But my voice sounded hollow, desperate, compared to her soft, trembling performance. She didn't need proof. She had tears. She had fear. And she had my son holding her, shielding her, as if I were a monster waiting to strike. I knew it, muttered my brother, turning his back on me. No, not. I lunged forward, but someone pushed me back. My wife's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as glass. Get out. I froze. The world tilted. Belinda, I whispered. Her eyes, usually warm and full of love, were cold, hardened. I said get out. My legs carried me backward, clumsy, trembling. I stumbled out the door and into the night, the sound of their voices still swirling in my head. Murmurs, accusations, judgment. Not one person defending me. Not one hand reaching out. I collapsed against my car, chest heaving, vision blurred with tears I couldn't stop. My heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted to break free. I couldn't breathe. Every breath came shallow, ragged, like I was drowning on dry land. How could this be happening? I had done nothing. Nothing but welcome Katherine into our family, treat her with kindness, support her marriage to my son. And now she had unleashed a bomb that obliterated my entire world in seconds. I sat there for hours, shaking, staring at the darkened windows of my own home, the home I wasn't welcome in anymore. My phone buzzed endlessly with messages I couldn't bring myself to read. I knew what they would say. The weight pressed down on me, heavier and heavier, until I thought my chest might cave in. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run inside and shake them, beg them to see reason. But I couldn't move. I couldn't fight. I was already condemned. And the worst part, the part that hollowed me out completely, was the look on my son's face. The way he held her, shielded her, as if I were the enemy. That night, as the sun rose and I was still slumped against the steering wheel, shaking with exhaustion and terror, I realized something chilling. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion. Katherine had planned this. And she wasn't done yet. Katherine came into our lives 10 years ago, back when my son, Eric, was in his late 20s. She was polished, confident, and sharp-tongued in a way that made her stand out. I remember the first dinner she attended at our house. She shook my hand with a firm grip, looked me directly in the eye, and said, You must be the famous father. Eric's been trying to live up to you his whole life. I laughed at the time, but looking back, there was something unsettling about the way she said it. Like she was measuring me, calculating. At first, though, I welcomed her. She made Eric happy, or at least that's what it seemed like. And what father doesn't want to see his son smile? She worked in marketing, always dressed to the nines, and had this way of commanding attention the second she walked into a room. My wife adored her instantly. Finally, Linda said one evening as we cleared the dishes, The woman who can keep up with Eric. I tried to believe that. But there were small things, little cracks that showed early on. Katherine had a habit of inserting herself into conversations and subtly twisting them. If Eric told a funny story, she would interrupt and correct him on minor details, making herself the star of the anecdote. If I complimented him on a promotion, she'd add, Well, he only managed that because I helped him polish his resume. Always smiling, always framed as harmless teasing, but always cutting him down just a little. I brushed it off. Families have quirks, right? It wasn't until a few years later, when they got married, that the tension really began to seep in. Katherine insisted on controlling every detail of the wedding. She clashed with Linda over the flowers, with my sister over the guest list. But when I tried to mediate, Katherine turned it into a performance. Oh, you're just so supportive. I wish my father had been more like you. It disarmed me. Flattery always does, doesn't it? I felt proud, especially even that she trusted me. But that trust became manipulation. She started calling me for advice constantly on jobs, on arguments with Eric, even on personal matters I had no business knowing. She would say things like, "You're the only one I can talk to. Eric just doesn't understand me." At first, I thought she was just reaching out. I wanted to be the good father-in-law, the dependable figure. But now I see what she was doing, weaving a narrative, planting seeds that could later be twisted into something darker. There were other moments that should have raised alarms. Once, after too much wine at a family barbecue, she leaned close to me and whispered, "You're in such good shape for your age, no wonder Linda married you." I laughed awkwardly, thinking it was just drunken silliness, but the way she held my gaze lingered too long. Later, she told Eric that I had been the one acting weird. He brought it up to me in private awkwardly, as if he didn't want to believe it but couldn't ignore it either. I reassured him, shook it off, but inside I felt off balance. And then there were the fights between her and Eric. She had a way of twisting every argument until he was the one apologising, even when she was clearly in the wrong. Linda and I would hear muffled yelling through the walls when we visited, only for Katherine to emerge moments later with watery eyes and a trembling smile, saying, "Marriage is hard, isn't it?" I kept telling myself it wasn't my place to interfere. That was the mantra I clung to. But I was blind, and Katherine knew exactly how to use that. By the summer before the explosion, the cracks had widened into fault lines. Katherine was suddenly distant at family gatherings, refusing hugs, offering tight smiles instead of warm conversation. I'd walk into a room and she'd fall silent, her eyes darting away as though I'd interrupted something private. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd laugh too loudly and say, "Of course not. Why would you think that?" Meanwhile, Eric grew colder. He stopped calling as often, avoided making eye contact with me. Linda said I was imagining things, but I felt the shift. And then came the whispers. A friend pulled me aside after church one Sunday and asked if I was doing all right. Another neighbour gave me a strange look when I waved from the driveway. At the time, I didn't understand why. I thought maybe it was stress, or paranoia creeping into my head. But the night of that gathering, the night Katherine unleashed her accusations in front of everyone, I realised the whispers had already been spreading for weeks. Maybe months. She had been preparing this. Slowly, carefully, brick by brick, building a prison for me that I didn't even see until the bars slammed shut. And the worst part? She had already turned my own son into her warden. It hit me like a freight train when I finally saw the messages. Hundreds of texts, emails, screenshots, all meticulously compiled. Katherine had created a digital trail of lies, carefully documenting every half-truth and twisting it into posing against me. I remember sitting at my desk, shaking, staring at the glowing screen in disbelief. The messages weren't just rumours, they were damning, cruel, and precise. She had painted me as a man I wasn't, fabricating encounters, twisting innocent interactions into proof of monstrous behaviour. One text from her read, "He cornered me in the kitchen and made me feel unsafe. I stayed silent because I feared for myself. Someone needs to know the truth." The problem was that encounter had never happened. She had carefully timed the screenshots to make it look recent, pairing them with innocuous events like me helping her with a plate at dinner. I felt bile rise in my throat. My hands shook uncontrollably as I scrolled further. There were emails to my friends and neighbours, letters to my son's co-workers, messages to Linda's family. She had systematically spread her lies for months. She had poisoned everyone's perception of me. My reputation, painstakingly built over decades, was erased in a single, calculated act. And then came the worst part, Eric's messages. My son had forwarded some of Katherine's evidence to his friends and colleagues. His words were cold, almost clinical. "I need to protect her. You're dangerous. I can't believe you kept this from me." Every line stabbed me in the chest. My own son, the person I had raised, now believed the monstrous image Katherine had painted. I tried calling Linda, trying to explain, to get her to see reason. She didn't answer. I left voicemails, desperate, leaving every shred of my dignity in the ether. She didn't return them either. Then the neighbours started avoiding me. Friends I had known for years suddenly seemed to vanish, as if I had been erased from their lives overnight. It wasn't just humiliation, it was complete isolation. Katherine had cut me off from everyone who mattered. I couldn't sleep. My mind ran in circles, obsessing over every interaction I had with Katherine over the years, trying to find the moment when everything went wrong. Panic attacks became my constant companion. I would wake up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, heart hammering, convinced she was outside my door or reading my emails. The physical toll was undeniable. My hands were always trembling. My stomach ached constantly. I lost weight rapidly, lost focus at work, even lost the ability to trust my own thoughts. And the betrayal wasn't just digital or social, it was personal, intimate. I realised the scope of her manipulation. She had turned everyone against me, including the people I love most. The people who were supposed to be my family. My home was no longer a sanctuary, it was a cage built from lies and fear. I confronted one of my oldest friends after discovering the messages. I pleaded, begged him to read the timeline to see the truth. His response was cold, detached, but laced with pity. "Look, man, I don't know what to believe anymore. Katherine seems scared, and Eric will. He's convinced. Maybe it's better if we step back." Better? Better for who? Not for me. I had been annihilated socially, emotionally, and mentally, and they all stepped back. Everyone stepped back, except Katherine, who was smiling somewhere, watching it all unfold like a puppeteer. Then came the final, sickening twist. I discovered that Katherine had been secretly meeting with a private investigator, feeding them selective proof and coaching them to corroborate their lies. She wasn't just spreading gossip, she had built an entire case against me. The psychological impact was unbearable. Every glance over my shoulder, every phone buzz, every knock on the door made me flinch. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. I couldn't even sit in my living room without reliving that night over and over: the betrayal, the fear, the loss of my family's trust, and the final blow. I realized she had always intended for this to culminate in a public confrontation she orchestrated at the family gathering. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was planned down to the minute. Every tear, every gasp, every shocked face I'd been cast as the villain in the story of her making. I was broken. Shattered. Alone in a world where the people I loved most had been trained to hate me. But as I stared at the glowing screen, at the mountain of deceit Katherine had constructed, a single thought kept me awake through the nights. She wasn't finished. She had shown everyone my destruction, and she would keep pushing until I was nothing. And I realized, with a cold clarity, that the next move had to be mine. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my living room, stomach tight, fists clenched. Every nerve in my body screamed that it was time to face her, to confront Katherine before she could spread her poison any further. I called Eric. His voicemail picked up. I left a message, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and desperation. Eric, we need to talk now. I have proof that everything she said is lies. I know what she's done. Please just hear me out. No call back. Not even a text. I knew it was coming. Katherine had him firmly in her grip. So I went to her. I drove to the house, the air thick with tension, every red light a drumbeat of dread. When I arrived, I saw her through the window, arranging flowers in the living room, calm, serene, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just obliterated my entire life. I knocked. She opened the door with that same false warmth, and I froze. Her smile was slow, deliberate, as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Hello, she said sweetly. I wasn't expecting you. Got the axe, I snapped, stepping inside. We're done pretending. I know everything, Katherine. Every lie, every message, every manipulation. You've ruined my life. Now we settle this here? No. Her expression flickered, just for a second, but it was gone. Settle what, exactly? You're overreacting. I laughed bitterly, a sound that startled even me. Overreacting? You turned my own son, my friends, my family against me. You made me a monster in the eyes of everyone I care about. Overreacting? You're insane. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. I told the truth. You made me feel unsafe. I felt my hands clench until my nails bit into my palms. Unsafe, Katherine. You planned this. You've been plotting against me for months. You've been poisoning everyone I love. And now you're standing here, smiling like a saint. Her calm finally broke. Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. You don't get to accuse me of lying. Look what you've done to everyone around you. You're manipulative, controlling, and Eric needed protection. I couldn't believe it. Even now, she was trying to twist it on me. My voice dropped to a cold, dangerous whisper. Eric doesn't need protection from me. You've controlled him, poisoned him, turned him into a weapon against me, and you'll never admit it. Ever. But everyone will see the truth today. I had prepared. I had screenshots, messages, emails, timelines. I laid them on the table, each one a nail in the coffin of her lies. Her eyes widened. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Then she smiled, sharp and cruel. You think that proves anything? They'll never believe you. I've made sure of that. At that moment, the door opened behind her. Eric stood there, pale, silent, caught between us. Katherine, he began, uncertain. Stay out of this, she snapped. I turned to Eric, my voice pleading. Look at these messages. Look at what she's done. He hesitated, then took the papers. His face went from disbelief to shock as he read the timelines, the screenshots, the manipulated text messages. His hand shook. She lied? His voice was small, broken. She planned this, I said, my voice breaking with rage and relief. Everything you believed about me, she fabricated it. The confrontation escalated. Katherine screamed, accused. Rage, but every word she spoke was now evidence against her. As slowly, painfully, the truth cut through her web of lies. Authorities were eventually called, not for violence, but to mediate the fallout. Friends and family who had blindly followed her lies began to confront her, armed with undeniable proof. The consequences hit hard. She was investigated for harassment, and her manipulation of evidence began to unravel. Eric, horrified, apologized over and over to me, tears streaming down his face. My social circle slowly opened their arms again, though the scars of distrust would take time to heal. By the end of that day, Katherine sat silently in the living room, defeated, stripped of her power. She had underestimated the resilience I didn't even know I had left. I left their house that night, exhausted, body trembling, but with a strange sense of clarity. The nightmare wasn't fully overhealing nevers, but the weight of being completely powerless, of watching my life be destroyed, had finally shifted. I had faced the storm. I had exposed the betrayal. And though the road ahead was long, I had taken the first step back toward myself. The days after the confrontation felt like wading through thick fog. My body ached constantly, my mind replaying every moment of the betrayal, every look of shock and disgust I'd seen on the faces of those I loved. Panic attacks didn't just visit, they lived inside me, coiled and relentless. Sleep became a stranger, and when it came, it brought nightmares that left me gasping, drenched in sweat. I started therapy the week after the confrontation. Dr. Mears, with his quiet voice and patient eyes, didn't sugarcoat anything. You've experienced profound betrayal, compounded by social isolation and manipulation, he said. What Katherine did was traumatic. Your reactions are normal, but we'll work on reclaiming your life, step by step. Step by step. That phrase became my lifeline. The first step was acknowledgement, admitting that what had happened wasn't my fault. That was harder than any confrontation. For months, I carried guilt, shame, and self-blame emotions Katherine had deliberately planted in me. But slowly, I began to separate the lies from reality and manipulation from my own truth. Next was rebuilding trust with myself and with others. I reached out to friends I'd lost, cautiously aware that some would never return. Some did, apologizing for doubting me, for believing her lies. Others stayed distant. That hurt, but it was part of the process. I learned that healing doesn't require everyone's forgiveness, just my own. My relationship with Eric was fragile. He had been complicit in believing Katherine's lies, even if manipulated. Rebuilding our bond took long, honest conversations, many tears, and endless patience. We attended family counseling together, slowly untangling the years of lies she had woven between us. Seeing him cry, apologize, and finally understand the scope of her betrayal was one of the most emotional moments of my life. Linda's support was harder to navigate. She had been torn, caught between her daughter-in-law and me, and the wounds were deep. She joined therapy sessions with me, willing to rebuild the trust that had been eroded. Progress was slow trust, once shattered, cannot be repaired overnight, but we both committed to it, day by day. I also took practical steps. I changed passwords, monitored my accounts, and documented everything to ensure Katherine couldn't manipulate or intimidate anyone again. My life needed boundaries, not just for safety, but for peace of mind. Physically, I began to take care of myself. Long walks, gym sessions, even short runs outside helped my panic attacks recede slightly, replaced by the grounding rhythm of movement. I journaled obsessively, writing down memories, frustrations, and victories. Every word on the page was a reclaiming of my life from the wreckage she had left behind. Emotionally, I allowed myself to feel anger, grief, and sadness fully without judgment. Therapy helped me process these emotions, turning them from destructive forces into fuel for growth. I realized that Katherine's betrayal, while devastating, had also uncovered a reservoir of resilience I didn't know I had. Slowly, the fog lifted. I could walk into a room without expecting judgment, hear my name without flinching, answer a call without dread. The panic attacks became less frequent. Sleep returned in fragments at first, then in stretches long enough to feel human again. And then came a moment I will never forget. I sat with Eric and Linda at the kitchen table, a quiet Sunday morning. No accusations, no tears, just presence. Eric looked at me, the weight of the past heavy in his eyes. I understand now. I'm so sorry, he said quietly. I reached across the table and took his hand. We'll get through this, I said. The healing process isn't linear. I still think about Katherine, about the betrayal, about the nights I spent paralyzed with fear. But now there's clarity. Now there's control. Now there's a sense of self I thought had been stolen. I've learned lessons that no manual or guide could teach, that trust must be given carefully, that vigilance doesn't equal paranoia, and that betrayal, even the most crushing, can be survived. I still mourn what was lost: friends, years of peace, innocence in my family, but I've also gained something unexpected, the knowledge that I can survive the worst humans can do, and that my strength is deeper than even I imagined. Today, I'm cautious but not fearful. I am alert but not paranoid. I am scarred but not broken. The nightmare Katherine created is a part of my past, not the definition of my future. And in that realization, I have found a kind of peace, a hard one, painful, but unshakable understanding that life continues, and I am still standing.